Welcome to another weekly GameDev Log. This week's going to be another short one, as I did only manage to stream in a couple of days. I've been a bit busy this week as it was my birthday, but I did manage to get a couple of upgrades to my streaming setup, and you can see the lights behind me. And I also got a light for my face and a drawing tablet, so you should hopefully see a lot more artwork in this next week's weekly GameDev Log. Anyway, let's jump into day one. I decided this week I was going to work on the lives functionality. So basically, if you don't achieve like 3 stars on a level, I want you to lose a life, and then you'd have a certain number of lives, and then once you've run out of lives, you can't play the level. This past week, I've also been looking at different Unity videos about scriptable objects. I decided to use this approach to decouple the mono behaviors for the lives functionality. I began by creating a scriptable version of the base data types, so I had a scriptable int, float, and string. I then created a scriptable int and instantiated it and called it the player lives. After this, I ended up moving on to the user interface. Currently, there wasn't a lot of room on the heads-up display because I had the level indicator that was taking up quite a bit of room. So I decided to repurpose this area and instead put the lives there. Finally, I hooked up the UI element to display our scriptable int player lives. And that's it, so player lives should equal 3. Play this, 3. Sweet. The beauty of this is that now that I've got that all set up with the scriptable int, I can now modify that scriptable int with any other component, and automatically the heads-up display will just update without it needing to know about any of the other components or any other game object that's interacting with that player lives. Next up, I started working on a system to serialize and deserialize these new scriptable primitives that I'd created. So essentially, you'd have a game object in the scene which would have a new component on. In this component, you would choose the different scriptable ints and floats that you would like to persist. Essentially, when that game object then is enabled in the scene, it will get the information for each of the primitives out of a file, and then you could modify it in the scene, and then when that scene is unloaded and the game object is disabled, it will then serialize that information back out to a file again, which could be loaded by a different scene. Unfortunately, I ran into a few issues with this due to the singleton pattern I was using in my scenes. I moved on to working on a little heads-up display for the menu. Currently on the level select screen, you couldn't actually see any of the lives or any of that information. So I created a small duplicate of the in-game heads-up display, and then just deleted all the irrelevant information, such as like the timer and the score. Then added a little timer element to the menu heads-up display, so I could start doing a timer that then would add on the lives after a set period amount of time. Whilst doing the functionality for this new countdown timer that would add your lives on, I did run into a couple of issues. One, for example, is that currently the timer was counting up rather than down. Finally, by the end of day one, I'd managed to implement the lives functionality where you would lose lives for not getting 3 stars, and then the countdown was working correctly now, counting down to 0 and then adding your new life on. Really happy with the progress on day one. Ended up being like a 3-hour session, but the end product was that I had this lives functionality implemented. The only thing that I'd struggled with was getting that serialization and persistence between invocations of the game. So let's move on to day 2. The second day was mostly about refactoring. I managed to refactor out the singleton that was causing me such issues with the persistent scriptable objects, and I did a little bit of moving around different bits of components like the lives countdown. I separate out into its own component and things like that. Alright, we've got this here, yeah? So where do we want to start? Start from level select. Starting the game. We've got 3 lives, yeah? Jump in, lose 1. Still got 2. Jump in, lose 1. End it. We should have played at 0. Value 1. So that played at 0 would be lives. Got 1 life. That was true. Now if we load this, we've got 3 lives. 10 seconds passed. Unload this. Got 3 again. And that's it. That is it. Fairly happy with the progress this week. Obviously I didn't do as many streams as I'd liked, but I did manage to nail down a pretty tough piece of functionality. So we've got that countdown lives working now, where it'll add on the lives. You'll only lose life if you don't get 3 stars, and you've got like the cap, so it'll be capped out of the max number of lives and it won't go past 0. So yeah, pretty impressed with that. Okay, so that's it. Just remember, come subscribe to me on YouTube if you want to see more from me. Also, you can come join me on Twitch if you want to get involved whilst I'm doing my development. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.